I'm going to introduce you guys who are on my channel, my YouTube channel, to a new series that I am doing. And the reason that I am doing this series is because for my last full semester at Simpson College in my Capstone class, the last class that you have to take before you graduate, we had a semester long capstone project, and I worked with Iowa Watch and Suzanne Banky on this idea for this project that was gonna kind of be like a journalism project, but I took it in the way that I wanted to release podcast or interviews that I had done with people over Zoom, and I wanted to detail for students, professors, faculty, staff from colleges all across Iowa on what their experience has been like during this last year of COVID that we've been going through. And so I'm going to use this video as sort of like an introduction to the whole series, and I'm going to talk about some research that I found that pertains to these conversations that I had had. And then after I release this video, I'm going to put out each separate interview. So if you guys want to go look at that interview, you can. In total, I got 12 interviews. I can't remember of how many of those were students and how many were faculty and staff, but I will release those 12 interviews over the upcoming week or so. The next week, I'll probably drop like either one or two per day. Yeah, let's get started. Let's just talk about some of the research that I had found. So the first is this article that from the Chronicle of Higher Education that states that students are ready to enroll regardless of COVID-19 precautions, the survey finds. And again, I will link this if you guys want to go look at this survey. But there's a little graph here that talks about if the college/university requires wearing a mask on campus, would you want your child to enroll in the fall of the 2021 under each of the following circumstances? And 94.8%, and this is for the prospective first-year student, said yes. And then there's another question that says, if the college/university requires social distancing, would you sign up? Would you come to college? And that first-year prospective student, 91.5% of them said yes. And the third question is, if the COVID-19 vaccine is available but not required, 90.5 of those first-year prospective students said yes, they would still go. First-year student. And all of the numbers are over 70%. So, I mean, that's quite a remarkable number if you think about it. And the reason that I bring up this survey is because most of the people that I talked to in this interview that were students were on the younger side of things. They were either freshmen or sophomore, and none of them told me that they would consider not coming. All of them were in agreement that they would come back next semester, or next year, I should say, and continue their education. So, and honestly, the surprising theme of talking to many of these students is, I thought I was going to get a fair balance of, what's been positive and what's been negative. Obviously, there's a lot of things that people weren't expecting to deal with during COVID, but a lot of the freshmen were actually surprisingly really happy with how their first year had gone during COVID and going to college. And maybe that's because they had nothing else to compare their college experience to. So to them, it may seem like, an obvious step up from their senior year in high school. But regardless, I kind of found that a little bit surprising that a lot of students, that didn't deter them from wanting to come back, leaving light. And they're like, well, this is why I continue to come back. This is why I want to go to college. I set out to do this as my intention when I first came, so I'm going to go regardless if we still have to put up with masks and social distancing and any sort of requirements or protocols that the college has put in place. So the second one that I looked at was another article from the Chronicle of Higher Education talking about, so you didn't get a spring break this year. One of the great joys of the academic profession is the predictability of our work cycles. Academics tend to be creatures of habit, We gear up for a semester of a specific length and feel incipient relief as final exam week draws near. Then came COVID-19, the great disruptor of our beloved routines. For months now, we've adjusted to new virtual classrooms, new technology, and new schedules with as much grace and dignity as we can muster. But that doesn't mean we're fully prepared for the loss of one of our most cherished yearly traditions, spring break. Smack in the middle of a very long term, one that tends to be cold, gray, and dreary in many parts of the country, we have always treasured a whole week free from classes, committee meetings, and office hours. Unlike most professionals, we can't take random weeks off during the semester. Spring break has always been a time to re-energize for the final push through the busiest months of the academic year. Pandemic considerations have prompted many colleges and universities to cancel spring break. The rationale is simple: a compressed schedule reduces travel and the risk of a resurgence in infection. From a physical health standpoint, that decision is entirely defensible, but it also has ramifications from a mental health standpoint. But I think this is probably one of the bigger highlights that kind of surprised me, and maybe I didn't think about when going into this story or this project, is realizing how important a spring break really is for students, but also for faculty and staff. Maybe my lens and my perspective is kind of closed being a student because I tend to only think about how it is for students. But we have to understand that it's really hard for professors, for faculty and staff as well, because some of the insights that I got from talking to everybody in these interviews is like, man, like that mental fatigue of already going through a long semester topped with not having a spring break was really hard for a lot of people to actually keep it together and keep going. And I mean, I can even speak for myself. I think I'm speaking for everybody. 3 months, but you're not getting a break, and you just have to keep going. And there's been a lot of times during the semester where I've experienced fatigue and burnout and some issues with my mental health. And so I imagine a lot of students are going through the same thing. And like I said, faculty and staff. So spring break, just a week off, is so critically important for everybody, just to kind of decompress and not think about things. So my third example here is something that I found from the Journal of Medical Internet Research, and it is talking about the effects of COVID-19 on college students' mental health. So this is kind of a good transition in the United States, and this is an interview survey study. And the results are, of the 195 students, 138, which is 71%, indicated increased stress and anxiety due to COVID-19 outbreak. Multiple stressors were identified that contributed to the increased levels of stress, anxiety, and depressive thoughts among students. These included fear and worry about their own health and of their loved ones, which was 177 out of 195 students, 91%, reported negative impacts of the pandemic. Difficulty in concentrating was 173 out of 195 students, which was 89%. Decreased social interactions due to the physical distancing, 167 out of 195, 86%. The COVID-19 pandemic brings negative impacts on higher education. The findings of our study highlight the urgent need to develop interventions and preventative strategies to address the mental health of college students. Again, it's only 195 students, but I think you could say that this speaks in large to most college students in the United States, and people that may have never experienced anything wrong with their mental health, I think, started to see that as this last year unfolded. And it's an interesting study. I actually didn't find too many people in these interviews that talked about going through like a severe mental health rut, but some of them kind of expressed that now it seems like they have more issues where they have to pull themselves out of like an anxious or depressed or just a mental health rut. It's good to bring in a study like this to kind of put it out there on the forefront for people, because I mean, a lot of us just kind of had to wing it this year and had to adapt, and we really had no other choice regardless of what the circumstances could be. But it seems like COVID happened, and there was stress and anxiety and a lot of chaos surrounding that subject. But I think it's also caused a lot of other problems like mental health and other things. Obviously, not to take this in a different direction, but you talk about like politics and how this fits into the world of politics, and how people view the virus. People have differing views on the virus. So it's caused discussion, it's caused debate, it's caused arguments, it's caused polarization. And again, you're not going to find too many people that I talked to that actually had like a significant problem, but some of them echo this message of saying that, yeah, it's been really hard and it's okay to feel frustrated. I think we're all validated and sitting in our frustration of how somewhat ugly the semester has been. I mean, it hasn't been all bad. Like, I'm not just trying to say all these things to be pessimistic, but there's been a lot of negative side effects from COVID. So as we transition into the last article slash study that I looked at, which comes from the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, and it is talking about a study that measures COVID-19 pandemic's impact on college students' mental health and wellness. So kind of written by one guy. It's by William E. Copeland, and he's a professor of psychiatry at the University of Vermont. And I was going to try and interview this guy, but I never got a response from him just to get like an expert's opinion on it. He provides a glimpse into the question of how the pandemic may be affecting the mental health of undergraduates and especially that of first-year students. As the researchers note in their paper, students just beginning college away from home normally face disruption related to the separation from family. The study was conducted at the University of Vermont during last year's COVID-interrupted spring semester and involved 675 first-year students, 3/4 of whom were female. They had enrolled in a study that intended to assess their mental health throughout the process of how the unexpected pandemic affected students as they confronted their changed conditions. 576 of the students in the study completed the end of semester assessment. 485 of these students had completed nightly surveys of their mood and wellness as the semester unfolded. Importantly, 2/3 of the participants were pre-rolled in a UVM wellness program involving educational and residential interventions designed to encourage. Found that first-year students were indeed affected by COVID, with increases being noted in externalizing problems as well as problems with attention. Externalizing problems are those such as aggression or conduct issues which impact others. Crisis. This revealed that 68% of the participants said they did not feel confident in the government's response to the pandemic, although 86% remained hopeful that it would be resolved. Over 95% reported that they were complying with government rules and suggestions for appropriate behavior such as mask wearing and social distancing. Over 1/4. The students rated the overall level of disruption in their lives caused by the pandemic to be a 7.8 on a 0 to 10 scale. Pandemic students, especially first-year students, maybe needed more institutional support than ever. So it's interesting, again, that they bring up first-year students. That was kind of my idea for the project. My original thought was, again, everybody was affected by COVID, but first-year students, that's such a crazy transition to go from, whatever you were doing in high school, whether it be living with your parents, but then going to college to be on your own and adjusting to that life, whether it be a big university or even if it's a private college and if it's away from home. There are a lot of stressors, and like the article said, there's a lot pertaining to like separation from the family, separation anxiety, homesickness. And so how do you cope with all of that stress already by then, throwing a pandemic on top of it? So your social interactions are cut arguably in half and maybe even further than that. This idea of distractions and how students' attention was affected. I think honestly that may be one of the biggest points to bring up, and one of the things that I talked to about with some students is saying how like it's so hard to focus on all the tasks because a lot of them, generally speaking, are more asked to be inside now and haven't got out as much, don't take as many breaks, maybe aren't in as many classes, maybe aren't around people as much. So they solely focus on, the homework or the assignments, those aspects of the classes that you have to get done. So I think all these studies in these articles highlight some of the things that I talk to with people in my interviews, and if it can bring light to the situation, that's why I wanted to bring these articles into view so people could dissect it, and then it could support what we were talking about. Shows that we do, like at the end of this article, it says first year students more than anybody need they need more institutional support than ever. I know a lot of colleges this semester tried to implement like mental health days. There's a few girls that I talked to from Wartburg that talked about that, so you guys can look into that. On top of that, there's a lot more support with counseling and therapists on colleges, and it allows students to be a lot more anonymous. So if you're not comfortable with sharing your identity, yeah, so I mean that's kind of everything that I found. Again, I wanted to make this video first, and then you guys can go look at all the separate interviews that I did if you're interested in those. I will say there were a lot of good conversations with a lot of easygoing people that were really easy to talk to, and I'm very thankful that I got to talk to so many different people to get so many different perspectives on it. So I hope you guys enjoy it. It was a fun series. It was definitely a hard semester. I would say this is probably the hardest semester I've had to go through in a long time. Just trying to finish and get my degree. And again, on top of the pandemic, I thought it was like really hard to focus and stay motivated and move past that drudge and that frustration that this semester caused. And hopefully there'll be more opportunities in the future for me to do something like this, whether it be with an employer or if I decide to do it on my own on my YouTube channel, because I like talking to people, and it kind of, I mean, they are going to be podcasts. I'm probably just going to drop them on YouTube. Like I said, this will be the first video that will come out, and then I'll start dropping all the other interviews. So if you want to check those out, go see what we talked about, and let me know what your thoughts are. If any of you guys are students that watch my videos, tell me like how your year's been, what's been good, what's been bad, and hopefully we can have a conversation about it. But anyways, stay blessed, have a great day, and I will see you guys later. Thank you.